Sairam students, I welcome all of you once again to the third revision session of lesson number 23, infectious diseases and how to prevent them. Let's recall once again whatever things we have learned in the last lecture. So students, if you remember, in the last lecture we have discussed that there are 4 ways by which the diseases can be spread very immediately. So as you can see that over here, air, then food, and then water and insect, these are the ways by which the diseases can be spreaded to the larger extent. Okay, and at the same time, if you remember, I told you that how exactly the diseases are spreaded because of the consumption of the contaminated water. Suppose if we consume the contaminated water, then there are the chances that diseases like typhoid, cholera, diarrhea and jaundice, they might spread it immediately. So all these diseases, we call them as what? Waterborne diseases. So if we consume contaminated water, so these diseases can be spreaded. So even students, sometimes the water may appear very clear, but that doesn't mean that the water is safe for consumption. So although the water appears to be clean and clear, we have to boil it, and so that whatever germs are present in water, they will be killed very immediately. So these are the certain hygienic conditions we have to follow. Is that clear? And at the same time, always remember that if we want to prevent the spread of the diseases because of the water, then we have to avoid certain things. What we can avoid? We have to avoid washing of the cloth in the riverbank, and at the same time we have to stop the bathing in the water sources like well, river, etc. And at the same time we have to avoid defecating on the banks of the river. That means we have to avoid the public places for toilet. And at the same time we should drink safe water. That means the water should be either boiled one or water should be filtered one. So these are the certain things which we have to follow. And as you can see that as we saw diseases are spread because of the water, even there are certain diseases which can be spread because of the mosquito bite. Okay, so as you can see that the malaria and dengue, these are the certain diseases which are spreaded because of what? Mosquito bite. So these mosquito bite diseases are spreaded. So as I have told you that malaria is causes because of the Anopheles mosquito and dengue is causes because of the Aedes mosquito. So these mosquito are responsible for causing the disease, and that's why always remember that we have to avoid the mosquito bite. So students, here in this picture, can you see that what you see here in this picture? If you observe this carefully, so you can see that here in this picture a feast is going on in the open garden. So you can see that in the open space a dog is roaming here and there, and you can see that a lot of flies and the mosquitoes are roaming here and there, and people are eating. And at the same time you can see that food material are kept uncovered, and near to this feast you can see the cattle are there. So all these things are happening at the same time. Now you tell me, if we consume the food material in this condition, then what will happen? If we consume the food material in this condition, then there are the chances that number of people, they might get the gastrointestinal problem or diarrhea after eating the contaminated food at the function. So if we eat the food which is contaminated, so it causes the food poisoning. So food poisoning is responsible because of the contamination of the contaminated food. Is that clear? So we have to avoid the food consumption which is kept uncovered, and we have to see that wherever we are eating the food material, the basic hygienic condition has been followed. Is that clear? So students, why it is important to always cover the food material? So we have to see to that the food should be kept always covered. The reason is that you must have seen that flies are sitting on the dirt material. So when these flies sit on the feces of the person who has an intestinal disease, the germs of disease, they stick on their legs. Is that clear? So the mosquito, when they sit on the food material, so the germs which are present on their legs, they will get transferred to the food material. So as you can see that over here, when the same flies sit on the food material, the germs will enter the food. And if we eat that food, the germs may enter our body and we can also get the disease. So that is why students, always remember that it is important to keep our food always covered. Otherwise we might get the food poisoning, we might get the stomach hurt as well. Okay, so food is handled very carefully while we have to make it. Suppose if someone has an intestinal disease, handles or serves the food without washing his hands properly, then germs which are sticking to his hands can enter the food material. So here in this picture also, as you can see that the person is serving the food material without proper hygiene, without proper precaution. So here in this situation, what might happen that if he is suffering from any type of the diseases, so germs of his body, they will get transferred to the customers. So we have to follow basic hygiene condition at our home also while cooking the food material. Is that clear? So food contaminated in this way also can cause the diseases. So one must avoid eating it. So you have to see that wherever you are eating food material, it is completely covered with proper sources and it is completely covered, and there is no mosquito or there is no contamination of the food. And at the same time, maintaining the cleanliness everywhere, it is beneficial for our health. At our home also, whenever we are cooking the food material, we have to see that we are maintaining the hygiene in our kitchen also. If our kitchen is clean and healthy, then ultimately the family members will be in the good condition. If the kitchen is not dirty, then automatically family members are going to suffer. Because why? The reason is that whatever food we are cooking, it should be cooked in the clean places. So if the area is clean, then automatically we will become healthy. If it has contamination, then we might get suffer. So that's why health is wealth, and keeping our surrounding is very important to keep ourselves in good condition. Is that clear? So students, always remember that what steps will you take to ensure that the dust and the flies do not settle on the food in our house? So first of all, what you can do, keep the food covered like this. At home also, whenever if you are not eating food material, then you have to keep any type of the food material covered. If you keep the food material uncovered, then there are the chances that the germs and the dust, they will get settled down on the food material and food poisoning will occur. And at the same time, clean your hands thoroughly with the soap before eating anything and while cooking food material. So these are the certain hygienic conditions we have to follow to ensure that we were not getting infected because of any type of the disease. Is that clear? So keeping the food covered ensures that flies cannot sit on it. Dust and other rubbish in the surrounding also can't enter in it. This prevents the microorganism from entering the food, and also the spread of the disease can be prevented. So these are the certain things which we have to follow on our daily basis as well. Is that clear, students? And most importantly, you must have heard that many of the time you must have seen such kind of the patches on the skin. Am I right? So what are these patches over here? So these are called as what? Skin infection. So this picture shows the ringworm, as it is looking like a ring shape, and this condition it is called as what? Scabies. Okay, so ringworm and scabies, these are the skin infection which are caused because of the direct contact with the infected person. Is that clear? So students, always remember that ringworm and scabies, these are the diseases that affect the skin directly. Their germs are found on the skin. So if someone else comes in contact with the skin of the person having this disease or wears his cloth, then that healthy person will also get the same skin disease. So therefore students, always remember that our cloth should be personal. Stop sharing of the cloth at our home as well. At our home also, stop sharing towels as well. Even the towel should be personal. Your towel, your mother's towel, your father's towel, your sibling's towel, it should be kept separately, because we wipe our whole body with the help of the towel. So if we use the same towel and if other person uses also the same towel, then there are the chances that skin infection, it will get reoccur from one person to the another person. So if we want to stop this skin infection, we have to avoid the sharing of the cloth with the family member, with the friends as well. So we have to use our cloth only. Is that clear? And at the same time, so always remember that it is always better to avoid the sharing of the cloth, even at home also, even outside also. Is that clear? So it is better always. So we have to avoid and we have to take care of our skin as well. Okay. So what do you mean by over here epidemic of the disease? So right now we all are suffering from the COVID-19, right? whole world is rather suffering. So if whole world is suffering because of something, then that is called as what? Pandemic of the disease. But let's say, for example, when many people in one area get the same infectious disease. If many people in one area get the same infectious disease at the same time, then we call it as what? Epidemic of the disease. Let's say, for example, in Thane area. Let's say in Thane area, if many people are affected because of the same disease. Okay, so suppose if particular disease is affected just limited to the Thane area. So that disease is called as what? Epidemic of disease. When we use a pandemic word, when whole world is suffering because of the same disease at the same time. So COVID-19 is a pandemic. Initially COVID-19 was declared as an epidemic. We thought that it won't come in our country. But ultimately what happened? The disease spreaded in other countries as well. So then eventually we called it as what? Pandemic. Is that clear? But epidemic is a smaller version of the pandemic. Epidemic is a smaller version of the pandemic. So epidemic means what? In smaller area, if many people are affected with the same disease, so that is called as what? Epidemic of the disease. Is that clear, students? So what are the examples of the epidemic diseases? Example: flu, conjunctivitis. Conjunctivitis means what? Eyes infection. Cholera, malaria, and COVID-19. So these are the examples of what? Epidemic disease. And COVID-19 right now we all are suffering. It is the example of what? Pandemic disease. Is that clear? So I hope so, students, whatever we have learned today, you must have understood that very well. So always remember that, students, air, water, food, insect are the medium through which the diseases are spread. Hence, if everyone take care to ensure that the germs do not enter our food, water, or our air, and to prevent the breeding of the insect that spread the diseases, it is possible to prevent the diseases from becoming epidemic. So everybody has to follow certain hygienic level at the personal level as well. Is that clear? So what we have learned today? We learned about the food poisoning. What do you mean by food poisoning? The diseases which are spread through the contaminated food. The diseases which are spread through the contaminated food, we call it as what? Food poisoning. Okay, and what else we have learned? To avoid food poisoning, we have to keep our food packed properly, and we have to wash our hand thoroughly before handling the food and before eating the food. Is that clear? And what else we have learned? We have learned that ringworm and scabies, these are the skin infection which can cause a lot of damage to the skin. So to avoid the skin infection, we have to avoid the sharing of the cloth as well. Is that clear, student? So the next part of the revision will be continue in the next session. Bye bye, take care.